Welcome to People Doing Good for Others. Good morning. Welcome to People Doing Good for Others, where we celebrate and honor and hold in the light those who make significant contributions in our communities. I'm Gary York, and I'm grateful to be with you today. I want to thank Wilkes Communications, RiverStreet Productions, and 100.9 WIFM for this opportunity. Our featured guest today is Don Parker. He's a cattleman rancher from the Broadway community in Wilkes County near the racetrack. He and his son Brian are involved in a feeder cattle operation there and with Black Angus. He's also significantly involved in his church, where he's a Sunday school teacher at Fishing Creek Baptist Church. He's been had a career with the Wilkes County Sheriff's Department as a dispatcher, and this is going to be a wonderful experience. And good morning to you, my friend.
Good morning, sir.
Thank you, Don, and what an honor to have you here. And I met you at a cooperative extension, a little social the other evening, and I said, you know, that's a guy that could be a significant addition to our People Doing Good for Others. So tell us about your family and growing up and these 5 generations there on your farm.
My father's family moved to where I live at on Parker Farm. They moved there the year 1900. My father was 4 years old then, born in 1896. He lived there, and when he was approximately 21 years old, he went into the Army and was dispatched to Germany in the First World War. The most noted battle that they were in, he was in the 4th Division Foot Soldiers. They pushed the Germans out of the famous Argonne Forest with 3 days of intense fighting, and out of 250 soldiers, only 35 answered the roll call, and he was one of the 35. Then he came back to live where I live at, to the small Parker's Farm. He also had 4 brothers. Out of the 5, 4 were in the First World War at the same time. And he lived there the rest of his life where we live at. And my wife and I both grew up on small family farms and devoted pretty much of our life to be partially self-sufficient, growing a lot of what we eat.
Don Parker, tell me about your wife, and I've been really excited about meeting her, and she's here with us today as a little support for you. So tell us about your wife and your marriage.
We met in Wilkes Central High School. She was 3 years younger than I am, and we dated occasionally, and then after I graduated, we dated more, and we dated approximately a year and a half, and then we got married. And it's kind of a funny little thing about Sunday afternoons at her house. She had to feed a small house of broiler chickens, and then she had to milk the family cow, and then we would go to my house and do about the same thing, and then we might go to a movie.
Wow. Don Parker, we're so happy you're here. And you and Mary, when were you married?
November the 28th, 1963.
1963. All right. You also talked about your dad being a truck farmer. Give us some idea about that, and the sweet corn you also told me about.
The term truck farmers came about in those years. Small farmers grew products. My father grew several types of vegetables. And the term truck farming, they trucked them to town. He sold at the small grocery stores then. there was not a supermarket in town, either town, Wilkesboro, nor Wilkesboro at that time. So he lived his life truck farming, and that's the way I grew up, helping him.
Wow. And the sweet corn was, you said he saw that in a magazine and ordered some of the seed?
At that time, the people in the South did not know what sweet corn was. Up north, in some of Illinois and other states, they already had the sweet corn. He saw an ad in a seed catalog and ordered a small packet and grew it, and we ate it, and it was so much different than the old varieties of corn that we grew. Then the next year he ordered enough to plant and sell, and the people really liked the sweet corn, and that's how it come about in Wilkes County.
Wow. Don Parker, tell me about where you were maybe in your younger years before you went to the Sheriff's Department.
I have worked at some other public jobs, but I suffered a real serious back injury and surgery, and one of the deputies asked me if I would put an application in to work at the Sheriff's Department. I had problems with walking and moving around, so I could sit and dispatch, and that's the way the dispatching came about. I stayed there 23 and a half years. I would work night shift and farm in the daytime.
Wow. And so Dane Maston kind of led you into that direction, I think.
We were renting some land from Dane Maston's father, and that's the way I got acquainted with him, and he urged me to get an application and turn it in to Wilkes Sheriff Kyle Gentry, and Mr. Gentry hired me.
And this was about helping people, you talked about the fire departments, and just kind of give us a little scope of the folks and departments that were involved, and you getting that message to people that we have an emergency.
We were Wilkes Communications at the Sheriff's Department. We did all the 911 dispatching, and we dispatched for all 25 fire departments, all the Sheriff's Department calls, Wilkesboro Police calls, all of the paramedic calls and the highway patrol calls. All that came through where we worked at.
Wow. So do you remember starting that career and the first day there, maybe?
The first day, I observed the other operator. The second day, I started dispatching. I can remember one of the first calls I took, there was a fellow had a heart attack, and I got real nervous, but I worked my way through it, and I thought later, what kind of a job is this going to be?
So you were able to get the EMS to go pick him up?
They did. It happened to be the voting day, and so the first responders, there were very few of them then. This was in 1984. And the people got there and took care of the person and transported him on to Wilkes General Hospital.
Good. Wow. So that was the second day?
Yes, sir.
You were involved in saving a life the second day?
Yes, sir.
Wow. How wonderful. How wonderful. We also talked about your grandfather pocket watch that he carried with him every day during the war. Talk about this First World War and that watch.
That was my father.
Your father, excuse me.
And he had worked a little while on the railroad, and he had bought this watch from a railroad hobo. So it was a good-sized pocket watch, and he wore it, and my father's name was Spurgeon Parker. He wore it over his heart, hoping sometime that might defect him getting hit with a bullet in his heart.
Wow. Is it still in the family?
Yes, I have it locked up.
Do you? how wonderful. My goodness. As far back as you can remember, you've been a member of your Baptist church. Tell us about the name of it, where is it, and you're also a Sunday school teacher. I'd like you to really get into that, Don Parker.
Yes, it's Fishing Creek Baptist on Old 60. It was established in the late 1800s. Later, there was a branch off of Fishing Creek, and they named it Fishing Creek Arbor. At that time, people would build a little frame and put brush over the top of it to keep the sun out, and that's what they named their church, Fishing Creek Arbor. Okay. And it is a very big working church at this time, and it's only about 2 miles from where I go to church, Fishing Creek. And I was baptized there in the first group that was baptized in the baptistry in the church at about 12 years old. And then I grew up in the church. And I think one thing that has helped our family along, it's been a lot of hard work and a lot of commitment to Christianity.
Being a Christian.
Yes, sir.
It's the foundation of your family and
yes, sir.
Success you've enjoyed.
Yes, sir.
Wow. You're a Sunday school teacher. Tell
yes,
me
sir.
about how did that happen?
I had a good friend, he's still living, that I went to church with. His name was Carlos Perdue. He was a dairy farmer, and he asked me if I would take a class of the little kids. And with his encouragement, that's the way I started teaching. And I've taught somewhere around 40 years.
Wow. Do you have a kind of a teacher's guide, or how do you decide what it's going to be each Sunday?
We have a teacher's guide that we go by, and that's what I study out of, and it has the scripture in there for that particular Sunday. And I study that for a good while before I attempt to teach.
And you said the last Sunday was in Isaiah, and we talked about character. Can you just do that a little bit for me?
A whole lot of that was built on your character and your hope.
Hope.
And one thing I stress in my Sunday school class, if you're going to be a witness for the scripture, you've got to show that in your character. If you don't do any good witness to someone if your character don't show your Christianity.
So the character must be aligned with your witness to be effective.
Yes, sir.
Is that the way it is?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And your Sunday school class is at, what ages are they?
It's the adult men's class. Okay. Most of them about my age.
And is it 8 to 10, or how many folks will be there?
We have a small class, somewhere around 8 to 10 members.
Okay. So tell me about, as a teacher, do folks join in a lot, or how does that work? You encourage people to, I'm going to be doing a little service in my church this Sunday, and I sure hope they help me along with this. It's in Leviticus, and ooh, it's tough.
While I'm teaching, I will ask some of the fellows in there to comment on the scripture. And I have 2 fellows in my class that their daddy was a Baptist preacher. So they really know the scripture better than I do, so I ask them to comment occasionally. In fact, their father married my wife and myself.
Did you? You and Mary?
1963. Yes, sir.
Wow. Where is that church?
Is
it near your house?
It's on off of 115 South. You turn on to Old 60, and you travel Old 60 approximately a mile and a half. It's on the left.
And it was founded before 1900?
Yes, sir.
Right. So you have a big graveyard there, and
There's actually two graveyards. On down the road, just a short piece, there's an old graveyard where the first people were buried. And from what I understand, they met in a house near the old graveyard. And then later they started building the church that I go to, and that's where the big graveyard is at the present church.
yeah, wow. Your congregation, is it, tell us about it, how many folks will come on Sunday?
It's normally right around 100 people.
Wow, that's good size.
And we have some excellent singing.
Singing?
Yes, sir. And a lot of the people there are related to the former Brown family that I mentioned, Von Brown marrying us.
Yeah, sure.
A lot of the people there are related to him, and all of them can sing good.
You started in animals with a 4-H calf. Tell us about how that happened, and you were, I guess, at Wilkesboro Elementary then?
Yes, sir. I went to Wilkesboro Elementary, and they had a 4-H program there then, and they encouraged us, all of us that would, to get a calf ready, groom it, and walk it, and get it ready for a show. So my daddy gave me a little Jersey heifer, and I groomed her and walked her and got her ready for the show. That's really the way I started in the cattle business.
And that love for animals and being good to them, and they're good to you, and so that's how that started. How about the poultry business?
We built 2 poultry houses and had laying hens, and after several years of that, both of us went to work at a public job, and then we started in the early 1960s. That was when the cattle business started multiplying in Wilkes County. And a lot of it had to do with spreading poultry litter on the pastures, and that made excellent grazing for the cattle.
Yeah.
So that's the way as the 60s went on, the cattle business kept growing.
And during the time that you were a dispatcher, you were also farming some on the side?
I ran the farm in the daytime and dispatched at night for 23 and a half years.
And what all were you you had chickens and cows too?
We had stopped the chicken industry when I started dispatching, and we had cattle, and I worked a shift at the sheriff's department.
I thought one of the most interesting things about visiting your nice home and how clean everything was there, and got to meet Mary, and we spent a little time getting to know each other, that you also are about grandchildren and talking about Brian. How did this, he went to North Carolina State.
We raised 2 children, Brian and Stephanie. And Brian went to the Ag Institute at NC State. And both of our children live on our farm. They have their own houses. Their children, being our grandchildren, live there. And all of them are growing up on the farm. And they are very familiar where hamburger comes from. And we have 5 grandchildren, and we're expecting our first great-grandchild.
Right. And your granddaughter now, she's with Cooperative Extension.
She is Courtney Parker TV Paul, works for the Wilkes Ag Extension Service. She does 4-H and ag tourism and cooking classes and several things she does there. She graduated from Meredith College in Raleigh and taught school 1 year, and then went to work for the Extension Service.
Okay. Tell me about the Extension. That's where we met, and I'm a big fan of the services of North Carolina Cooperative Extension, and John Cothran and the other ladies there, how they help you. You want to talk about that?
The person that had John Cothran's job before him, his name was Matt Miller, and he was very helpful in our growing in the beef and forage production. And then when he retired, they hired John Cothran, and he has been a very beneficial person. And when we have questions about cattle or forage or hay, he always has an answer. And Matt Miller, I never asked Matt a question, but if he didn't know the answer, he would look it up and mail me some kind of literature on what I asked. Those two people are, I feel really honored to meet these honored people and work with them.
Right. In good hands, those folks that, like you say, they might not know the answer, but they promise to find it.
Yes, sir.
And get back to you. Courtney is married into a family of fruit growers, apples primarily. Talk about how that works, what you know about it.
I don't know an awful lot about the orchard business, but there's a famous orchard, TV Paw Orchard, on the Brushy Mountains. And Courtney met their son. He had a twin brother, and so they married, and I have a lot more knowledge now about the orchard business than I did before they married.
Yeah. Talking
to them at different occasions.
And I met her father-in-law, Amit?
Arndt TV Paw.
Okay. So he said the 30 acres, that's the acreage that they want to do because they have the labor to handle it. And the folks come to the orchard to buy. They never have to go out and try to sell their product. That the established character, like you're talking about, of the product there, that folks come there and to buy the product from them.
Mr. TV Paw, he and his wife are very hard, serious working people, and they have built a building to process their apples. Also in that building, they have a sales part of it where people come, they can look at the apples and discuss, and they sell apples there, plus some other like jams and jellies and things of that nature.
Okay, I hope to get there sometime. I was very interested in meeting him, and you encouraged me to take some pictures of the family, and I enjoyed doing that. So that's how this our relationship has grown from you being at the table and asking me to take a picture of the family. And this will be 5th generation, is it?
The 5th generation, my grandchildren living on the farm, that's the 5th generation. The expected great-grandchild will be 6 generations.
How wonderful. Now, let's go to your career now. And when I met you, talking about feeding being such an important part of, you and Brian, you said you noticed that he brought back some great ideas from North Carolina State, and you said, I think we need to be doing this. So give us some idea of how the herd has grown and where it is, and just the ins and outs of your operation now, Don Parker.
At the time Brian attended State College, we only had 40 to 50 brood cows. That's the mama cows. When he graduated, came back home to live, he started talking about a lot of the record keeping and the genetics in cattle. And so I thought I better listen to him and do a lot of the things that he recommends doing. And from that time to now, we have grown to around 200 mama cows, or call them brood cows. And when we wean calves off, we worm them, vaccinate them, and get them ready.
How old are they then when they're weaned?
Somewhere 8 to 9 months old.
8 to 9 months, all right. And then just keep going there. There's so much for us, for our folks that are watching us today to learn about these commercial herds, if you will, and how it works.
When we wean these calves off, we put them in a separate pasture away from their mothers. Then as we feed them and we get them in real good shape, health-wise, and then we talk to one of the order buyers, and they'll send a representative to the farm. Some of them will video them, some of them just look at them, and they determine if they need that group, and then we talk about price per pound. And the older cows that we cull, we sell most of those at Wilkes Livestock Exchange.
Okay. Now tell me about those replacement heifers. I think that's a vital part of your operation. Tell us about that, Don Parker.
When we wean these calves off, each calf and each cow has an ear tag with a number on it. So we know what these calves came from. And we observe these heifers as they grow, and their temperament is the way we select them out.
Temperament?
Yes, sir.
Tell us a little bit more about that, if you will. I just think that's so interesting.
If we've got a cow that is wild-natured and kind of aggressive, she don't stay on the farm too long because it's a safety hazard. You can get hurt real bad with an animal that don't like to socialize with you. And
so you want them real quiet where you can stand or be close to them.
Right. And we observe these heifers as we've got them in the feedlot. And if some of them shows the aggressiveness of their mothers, then they go with that load to whoever buys them.
It's Don Parker, how wonderful. Thank you.
It's too much of a liability to keep even the bulls.
And they'll just come out, they're born just kind of spooky?
No, you don't notice the spookiness till they get a few months old.
Okay, okay. You raise your own hay. Let's talk about how that works.
We do. We have several acres. Most of it is rented land that we use to bale hay on. And then we also have some land that we grow corn silage on. And we get that processed and put it in the silo. And then during the winter, we feed dry hay and corn silage. And there's a new type of hay, what we call haylage or silage hay. We cut that, let it wilt a little bit, and if you can get the moisture content under 60%, then we bale it wet and have it wrapped in white plastic.
And it kind of ferments.
And it does a whole lot of what the corn silage does.
Okay.
And
wow.
then as we are feeding in the wintertime, we feed that along with the dry hay.
Okay. And let's go back again to the chicken litter, and you buy that, or folks, you have a relationship with people who have houses, and you get the litter, and that's what grows that great hay. Is that kind of the way it works? We
have a fellow that we are good friends with. He has a large broiler operation. He don't have the land to spread the litter on, so we buy litter from him and we spread it ourselves. And we keep records of which field and how many loads go on each field. That's called a log book that I keep in the spreader truck.
Right. So the chicken business is so vital to your operation in the cattle business.
The poultry business and the cattle business in the early 60s, it grew with each other. Each section boomed in the 60s. And that's real vital to the cattle operation.
Don Parker, you've been such an interesting and informative guest for me today, and I shall always treasure this. And I want to thank Wilkes Communications and RiverStreet and WIFM. As we come close to the end, with your wife Mary being here, and what an honor it is to have her. You've lived a good life. You're a Christian. You believe in treating people with dignity and respect. The honor of having a good life, and your church and your family and those things that I've learned about you that are so near and dear. Just a few words about how the Lord's blessed you.
Before I started dispatching, I noted earlier, I had a real serious back operation. I was helping the fire department. In fact, I ran fire calls for about 35 years. I ruptured a disc real bad, and it took me a good while to get where I could walk and work again. So as I got better and better, I thank the Lord a lot of times for helping me get better off that. And I thanked Him for steering me towards a job that I could do. And I stayed with it, like I noted before, 23 and a half years. And I always felt like if I could accomplish something by helping someone that needed it, that was close to me. And I always wanted the people, whether it be fire, rescue, or law enforcement, if I could make them understand on the radio what they needed to hear, I felt like that was an accomplishment to me.
So you answered the high calling to be a servant in your
Yes,
community, and you've carried that all the way through your life. And thank you so much for that. What an honor to have you here, dear friend.
Thank you, sir. It's an honor to be here and meet you.
God bless you. Don Parker, a wonderful servant of the Lord, a person that's a significant community advocate. He's with his son Brian, is in the feeder calf business, and he also is a Sunday school teacher. So thank you for being with us, and promise to come back again for our next show. So we celebrate Don Parker, and his wife Mary's here too. So it's been a great day for people doing good for others, and thank you for your dedication to cut on the TV and be part of this ministry. Thank you very much.